Today is the first real spring day we've had, and I'm recording this reflection on Thomas with my hair blowing and my skin shining, and imagine what that must have been like on the first Sundays when Jesus had finally shown up. There's a magic in the story of Thomas. So often he's been dismissed as just Thomas the doubter, the one who didn't believe what he was told, but in all honesty, why should he? What is wrong with doubting? What is wrong with questioning? The church's long history of dismissing people who ask questions. My podcast buddy Deb talks about her own childhood where she'd be asking really good questions and the people around her, the adults, would just say, oh, just take it by faith. That's not good enough for most of us. It wasn't good enough for Thomas either. We have here a story of a man who was incredibly faithful. Thomas was the one when Jesus said, okay, we have to head towards Judea now because Lazarus has died and we have to be there. Everybody else was saying, but Jesus, they're going to hurt you. And Thomas said, well, if we're going to go, we're going to go, and I'm just going to experience the whatever trial and problem that Jesus encounters. I'm going to be right there. So Thomas was not a man who was doubting. He was a man who kind of put things in perspective. So when he showed up after Jesus had appeared to everybody else in the room, and they'd had that experience already, he simply said, I wanted that experience too. And Jesus did not punish him for that. When Jesus came the next week and Thomas was actually in the upper room and he was there to watch what was going on and Jesus finally appeared, he had the same experience. You know, it's kind of funny that there's a few metaphors in there for churchland, quite frankly, about how we tell people who are later to the game that they just have to catch up. Why? Why should they have a different experience of the risen Christ, a different experience of the Holy Spirit, a different experience of God in their lives just because they're later to be part of it? That does not make sense. And it's certainly not something that Jesus ever outlined as acceptable or normative. So we've got the story of Thomas. And Jesus said, touch me. And Thomas did. And then he said the most profound statement in the whole of the Christian scriptures, said, my Lord and my God. He recognized who Jesus was right away. Jesus then went on to say that there are those who are going to believe without this kind of experience. And that was great, but that was not a reprimand for Thomas. He was the kind, quite frankly, like me, who wants to have a more tactile experience of faith. I'm reminded actually of, I believe it's Teresa of Avila, who was the one that penned, Christ has no other hands but ours, no other feet but ours, no other lips but ours. Thomas was kind of the precursor to that. He had the opportunity to be there, of course. And I do want to actually just draw a parallel here, because earlier in this chapter, in the 20th chapter of John, Mary Magdalene is told, don't touch me, but the actual words are, don't hold on to me, don't keep me here. It's not about not touching. So it's not that Thomas got allowed to have the experience and Mary Magdalene was denied. They were two different experiences. Mary Magdalene wanted to just have that moment remain. Thomas was more interested in actually having the physical encounter with Jesus. And we can't avoid the literary aspect of that too, because by Thomas having this experience, we're reminded again that Jesus did raise bodily. This wasn't a spiritual thing. This wasn't a trick of lights and mirrors and memories. Jesus was physically there with them, breaking bread, doing things with them, reminding them that hope goes on. And that ultimately is what was going on for Thomas, is there was a moment where Thomas could make that grand proclamation that Jesus was raised, my God and my King, the one who knows what's going on. But there's hope in that, because Jesus goes on to say there's many more who are going to have faith without the opportunity to have this engagement. They're only going to be able to count on you telling them about it. And how important that is to remember that questions are not bad, that believing just a whole hog, swallowing without kind of trying to find out what else is going on, it's not necessary. we can actually delve a little bit deeper into this. We can find out what it is that that is going on. We can ask the things that don't make sense to us. We can clarify things. None of this is against the gospel as we're told it, as we're asked to share it, as we're asked to live it. Questions are not bad. Doubting is not a sin. Waiting to have a little bit more evidence is not a hardship. A lot of us are just wired to do that. In fact, I'm more suspicious of the person who pretends they believe completely without questioning anything, because I wonder, do you actually understand this? Do you see these connections? Is this making sense to you? Or are you just saying what you think I want you to hear without it really kind of going a little deeper into what it is you might be struggling with? Where does this kind of connection land for you? What do you want out of this? All things that we can't find out if questions are not asked. And as people who are pastoral, we fail if we just tell people don't ask questions and then assume that we've done our job. Because how do we know? Ever? How do we know? We need to be with people on a journey, and journeys do not automatically mean that everything works or that the conclusions are solid. A journey is an act of discovery of ourselves as much as the territory that we're going through. Thomas grasped that. Jesus did not discourage that. There's a beauty here in the entire encounter. So on this second week, or second Sunday of Easter, if you're feeling you want more questions answered, if you're feeling that places are not giving you what you need, then start asking questions, start looking for them. You can comment on this, I will answer your questions for you, or you can take it to somewhere else, another social media, another place. Be cautious of the ones who want to shut you down, because they either don't have answers or they are wanting power over what you believe, and they're not willing to take that walk with you. Thomas will take that walk with you. All the disciples will. And Jesus most definitely will take that walk with you. As the disciples had more encounters with Jesus and more people outside of the inner quorum had experiences, the hope returned. The resurrection, the understanding of why we're doing this, it came back to them. Slowly but surely, they became more confident in what they were called to do. And a large part of that is because Thomas did a little bit of leading. That you can ask questions, you can be unsure, and then have your questions answered and move forward. That's a good thing. It's a model for our faith. Thomas, he's not a doubter. He was honest, and that's how he deserves to be remembered.